And welcome everyone to our next meeting of the Senior Fraud Task Force. And it's so great to see everyone today. And this is a very special day too, because we have the debut of our new clerk, Cameron Clark, who is also going to be the new clerk for the Committee on Aging. So I'm going to take a quick moment to introduce Cameron. Cameron, introduce yourself rather to us and tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Cameron Clark. I'm a recent graduate of CCSU with a background in history and political science. I just started up here and I'm looking forward to working on the Aging Committee and the Aging Task Force.
Thank you very much. And I also want to give yet another shout out to our founding clerk, Joe Perkis, who we super appreciate you helping to onboard Cameron and kind of shepherd him into his new role. So thank you again, Joe, for all your work. And I'm going to now kick it to my co-chair, Joan, for her opening remarks before I begin again to introduce our guest. Thank you very much.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for being here again. We have 2 more meetings scheduled for our task force. So we do have 2 great speakers today where hopefully we'll gather some more information for our report. And then Michael and I are going to start compiling some of the information and hopefully have it presented for the next meeting, February 3rd. So we as a task force can go over that and figure out what needs to be in our final report. We may have some legislators visit us at the last meeting as well, but at this point, I think we're hoping to spend most of the next meeting really finalizing our report, because the session will be starting shortly thereafter, and we really wanted to get this report out to the legislators for their short session. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I know a few of you have already sent in some ideas. Marie and Michelle spent a lot of time on putting together some information, so I really appreciate that. It really is helpful to get everybody's input, since we only meet twice a month and we're really trying to gather as much information during our meeting. So if you do have anything that you want to submit in writing to an email to me and Michael and Cameron, we would gladly accept that, and we can compile it all into a report. I think that's it for me. So Michael, if you want to introduce our guests for today, we can get started.
Yes, thank you very much, Joan. And just to kind of echo a little bit what you're saying. So this is our penultimate meeting, and we are definitely hoping to have a preliminary draft, hopefully before the next meeting. And Joan and I will be working on that, and maybe we'll have some group emails back and forth. And we want to be as inclusive as possible, by the way. So I definitely encourage all of our members to send in what their highlights are. And typically a task force handling a topic like this would have another half a year to keep working on this and drafting a report. But we will endeavor to be on time and under budget. Recently, the Connecticut General Assembly published the major issues of the 2022 legislative session document. And on page 3, under the Aging Committee, we find 2 exclusive major issues to be very familiar. The first is a community ombudsman program. It's calling for the long-term care ombudsman program and DSS to develop a proposal for a new community ombudsman program to investigate complaints from recipients of DSS-administered home and community-based services. This session, the legislature may consider proposals to implement that program. So that's nice. All of our work is very timely. And the second major issue is senior fraud prevention. Last session, the legislature established a 10-member task force to study ways to protect seniors from fraud, including a study of planning services for Medicaid applicants under Public Act 2184, Section 2. That's us. So this session, the legislature may consider the task force recommendations, which are due to the Aging and Human Services Committee this month. So we read that as before session, but no pressure, okay? So, the proposals may include, among other things, modifying education and training requirements for individuals who provide Medicaid long-term care planning advice. And that brings us to today's meeting. And the theme about it is really the downstream effect that we have been discussing. What happens and what are the consequences when it's too late and the executive branch law enforcement has to get involved? What's the impact on the criminal justice system? Considerations include the cost of incarceration, which is on average, over $60,000 a year to keep someone locked up. Parents not wanting to cooperate or testify against their children who may be stealing from them. We've talked about the shame and concerns that older adults feel when it comes to reporting fraud and other crimes. And we know that only about 1 out of 23 cases even gets filed in the first place, as was recently discussed by Attorney General Tong at a recent meeting last month in Darien, where he was discussing a collaboration with the Elder Justice Coalition and the launching of a new hotline to report elder crimes to the Attorney General's office. And that number is 1-860-808-5555. We applaud and we appreciate this great collaborative effort, which includes the partnering with many state agencies and organizations, including Protective Services for the Elderly, the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, the Department of Banking, who we heard from in our last meeting, the Department of Consumer Protection, and others. The 1 out of 23 statistics, however, it remains staggering, and it's leaving behind so many victims that we don't even know about. And there are resourcing issues that exist to fully investigate and prosecute cases, tools and talents like forensic accounting that are lacking. So as we continue to discuss, to consider the longevity economy and focus on prevention and addressing needs while minimizing criminal justice contexts, what would that look like? And how does that look now? And so we are happy to have representatives from PSC and the chief state's attorneys with us today to discuss this and tell us more about their work and share some recommendations that they may have. And so with that, I am happy to introduce our first guest speaker, Dorian Long, the leader at Protective Services for the Elderly. And we appreciate you taking time from your very important work to speak with us today, as your agency is a critical component of Connecticut's asset-based approach to addressing the needs to prevent abuse and protect victims. Welcome to the circle, Dorian.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint that I will put up. Let's see. We usually use Teams, so let me just get my Zoom skills going here. So share. All right. Can everyone see?
Yep.
All right. So as Michael shared, Connecticut's Department of Social Services is the state agency that's mandated to administer the Protective Services for the Elderly program. We at DSS administer the program directly within our Social Work Services division. So when we talk about, the mandate that we have under Protective Services, it really is to investigate allegations of maltreatment of persons age 60 and older. And this is spelled out in our state statute that's listed here on the slide. So, we are obligated to perform this function, and it is a very needed function, as you'll see later in the presentation with the number of referrals that we receive. So I know that I'm here primarily to speak to financial exploitation, but I did just want to share a list of the more other categories of maltreatment that the department addresses in PSE and share that list. And because the manner in which we receive circumstances for investigation, it's quite multifaceted. So usually we get referrals that have, multiple allegations. So, you may have a situation where a client is reported to be in a neglectful situation and is not meeting their needs. And then upon further review, it may be that there is also some financial concerns that are happening with that elder. Maybe it's an issue of physical abuse, and it turns out that it was a conflict between, a caregiver or son or daughter who was pressuring an elder for finances, and things became physical. So there really isn't always a clean way to identify, what's happening with the folks that we're serving, because it's so complex. So I just wanted to just share that with you, and then I'll go into financial exploitation in particular, but I wanted to just speak to that. So, exploitation, we understand that of, taking advantage of, other person's, either money or property, or just really engaging in activities that are harmful to an elder, and taking their resources inappropriately. And in our program and just in the world, exploitation takes place in a myriad of settings, right? So you've got your typical mail scams, telemarketing scams, the computer, and in person. And so, romance scams. And I know that we had people speak to those. I think Consumer Protection, didn't they speak to some of those activities as well? But we have a lot of activities that happen with the elders that we serve that are experiencing in-person exploitation. And the majority of the persons that engage in those types of activities are persons who are close to the elder, in a trusted position, whether that's a family member, a friend, a neighbor, unfortunately, even powers of attorneys and conservators. Trusted individuals are often the perpetrators of maltreatment for the folks that we see in this program, and that's true nationally. So some of the things that bring elders that are experiencing maltreatment to our attention are things like the termination of vital utilities, unpaid bills and liabilities despite having sufficient income, signing over their assets without really understanding kind of what's happening, changes in the oversight of assets without a clear explanation of what's happening. We encounter elders that are writing checks out to cash for unknown reasons. There are changes in their financial patterns. When asked about their finances, they're unable to articulate what their financial situation is. And when you have these types of changes, it can go horribly wrong. Elders can face eviction, foreclosure, experiencing liens on their property. It really can be, quite challenging. And again, I think as Michael, you spoke to earlier, this is what's happening down the line by the time we're getting involved. And so, we're addressing those issues as best we can in partnership with all the other entities that engage in the support of our elders. But it's pretty ugly by the time we get involved. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to the next slide?
Maybe we'll do questions at the conclusion of your
Do 'em-
presentation, if that's okay.
Okay, beautiful. That's fine. That's easier for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and then when we're looking at, making referrals, I just wanted to make sure that I included information about being able to make a report. There are individuals that are mandated to report maltreatment, including exploitation by law, but anyone can make a referral to the department. So I just want to make sure that if folks are encountering circumstances where an elder is in a situation where their finances are in peril, it is okay to contact us. You do not have to be legally mandated to do so. And in brevity, I'm not going to go into all the mandated reporters. It's a list longer than my arm. So just wanted to kind of generally go through the process of what happens with the program. So we receive a call, or we get a fax or a mailed report to us. Our staff that reside in our central office screen those reports and document them. and then they identify how quickly we need to be deployed. Our staff in our regional offices are the individuals who actually go to the elder's home to assess the situation. So basically, in the course of an investigation, we want to first, validate, is this really the circumstance? And one of the things that sometimes folks have challenge with is that typically in our cases, our initial visit is unannounced. And there's a reason for that. If we called ahead, the circumstance may not be what was reported to us. We really want to try to get a handle on that situation early and see it for what it truly is. It's not a criminal investigation, but we are able to make referrals to the chief state's attorney's office, to law enforcement, and it's very important that we have these partners in addressing maltreatment. So, in the course of a protective services case, what a worker is going to be doing is to assess the elder for signs of any kind of cognitive, visual, or hearing deficits that may be impacting their ability to manage. Determine the extent of the client's estate. What do they have? What are their resources? Sometimes, what were their resources? Identify the relationship between the elder and the alleged perpetrator. In many circumstances that we encounter, it is family, but sometimes it is a stranger. Determine, any property they may own. Follow up on any misused bank accounts, and to determine whether or not law enforcement has already been contacted. So, in the course of the investigation, we do have the ability to secure bank records, and that is supported through both state and federal law. And so, and sometimes it takes some time for us to be able to do that. And in speaking to the resource issues that Michael alluded to, sometimes it takes time for us to get those documents, but also to have the internal resources to review those documents, because depending on the circumstance, it can be quite complex. So we have some elders that have, many accounts, or the alleged abuser has, transferred funds to various locations. It can get quite complicated. But it's not just wealthy clients that experience financial exploitation. Even our clients that are receiving, state administered and federal administered benefits also have these challenges. So, you may have an elder that's, needs supplemental food, and they're on SNAP, and their card is being used inappropriately. Or you may have someone that has been identified as the fiduciary for an elder's funds, and they're using them inappropriately. So, sometimes we think of, the sensational cases like, Mickey Rooney's circumstance, for example. But you can be of any financial circumstance and experience financial exploitation or exploitation in general. So I just wanted to point that out. We do have a subpoena powers to get, records. We also are able to provide an assessment of the elder and work with them on identifying what resources they want to deploy, what supports can we put in place, depending on the nature of the case. There may be a need for us to provide some time limited case management. We may need to facilitate access to medical care, and in some cases, even identify emergency housing, and then refer for other legal assistance. If an elder's been a victim of identity theft, for example, we are able to deploy and help folks to facilitate that. Maybe they have a power of attorney who has transgressed, helping them to get to resources that would help them, sever that relationship. So there are a myriad of interventions that we engage in to support an elder. And in certain circumstances, we may need to seek legal support or court support in order to get an injunction against a caregiver that may be interfering with our ability to get supports that an elder may want. Or we may need to petition the probate court in order to get permission to even enter the premises if we have serious concerns. That may not be the situation in a financial exploitation case, but because these cases are often co-occurring, there will be circumstances where that occurs. And as a last resort, if the elder is presenting with some cognitive challenges and we've been able to get them assessed by a physician who also agrees that these challenges are affecting the elder's ability to manage their affairs, we can file for conservatorship. That is our last resort, and it is something that's done in concert with a medical professional. The department social workers are not authorized and do not have the legal authority to just kind of take someone out of their home or really kind of exert our will without an intervention to support that. So just wanted to kind of provide some overall numbers of our cases. So this is all of the cases by gender. So it's usually just a good breakout for us to see the number of cases. So in calendar year 2021, we had 43 cases served. And we have been, except for 2020, we've been on an upward trend with our services requested under PSE. And we surpassed our 2019 numbers in 2021. So even with the ongoing impact of the pandemic, our referrals continue to rise. So I thought it was important for us to see the impact of exploitation cases and how many we've served. So these are allegations, not individual cases that we're serving. As I stated earlier, one case can have one or more allegations. And so, what we can see here is that exploitation represents a little over 23% of all the allegations that we receive in the protective services program. So it is not insignificant. Obviously neglect and self-neglect when combined, because they fall under the general category of neglect. It's the second largest, actually. We separate self-neglect and neglect just so that folks can kind of see the nature of it. But when you're looking at statute, neglect is a standalone category that encompasses self-neglect. So exploitation really is the second most frequent referral that we receive in the program. So I just wanted to point that out. And then folks asked, when I spoke to Matt from our department, he said, what ideas do you have for action that can support these activities? And so I would, propose that we explore, legislative options, as we spoke about earlier, that can prevent and respond to elder abuse. So looking at what other states are doing in relation to financial exploitation and seeing if there are things that, I believe that if someone's done some cool work, I'll copy that homework, no problem. So, it's very important for us to explore those options. And to continue to expand training opportunities for elders so that they can be informed stakeholders, whether that's financial institutions, protective services ourselves, law enforcement, prosecutors, the courts. This is a complicated issue. And sometimes when we encounter these cases, the nature of them requires that it's almost like peeling an onion. So, you're dealing with a lot of documents, you're dealing with individuals, including the client that we're trying to support, maybe not being as engaged in the process for a myriad of reasons. And Michael, you spoke to some of those earlier, but if it's a family member or someone that they really care about, they don't want to see them experience a bad outcome. Obviously, the alleged perpetrator doesn't want to cooperate because they're going to obviously experience a bad outcome. So there are a myriad of things, and it's complicated, and we all struggle with that. And the latest report on protective services, the statewide assessment by the state auditors, identified that enhancing the capacity to address financial exploitation cases is needed, and we agree. And we are exploring options to see what we can do to secure resources to better support our investigation of financial exploitation cases. We want to increase the tools, as I stated before, be able to connect with subject matter experts, and then also explore what our institutions of higher learning can do regarding best practice research, regarding the populations we're serving, as well as best practices related to, addressing financial exploitation, prevention and intervention. And then look to see what other vehicles of collaboration that we can do. And so there are multidisciplinary teams that are specific to financial exploitation. They're called FAST teams. And what can we do to increase the number of ways that folks that are involved in elder fraud issues can work together to ameliorate some of these situations. And then again, increase public education and awareness just in general for the general public. We are at the department are working with the National Adult Protective Services Association on a national campaign related to basically adult protective services, because Connecticut's unique in that we have elder protective only. But it certainly is an opportunity for us to get the word out there, because folks are less aware of the elder protective services program than they are, for example, child protection. So we want to ensure that the general public is aware of what we can do, and that there are vehicles to be helpful to support this. Another thing that I didn't actually put on the slide, but have we explored all of the vehicles that some of the banks offer as far as protection? Is there information that we can give to elders to identify folks that can be contacted when there are problems on their account? Can we limit the cash withdrawal amounts that are allowed on accounts? These are things that you would be able to put on your own account so that you're not exploited. So there are a myriad of things that can be done to support and prevent it, because once this has happened, a lot of the times it's very difficult to get the elders' resources back. In most cases, that does not happen. So we want to pursue justice for the elder after this has gone down. But there's still there's a statement when folks make reference to financial exploitation, and it says that financial exploitation can steal your future. And depending on what the nature is of the financial exploitation, it really can be absolutely life changing. You can lose your home, you can lose your ability to pay for care, which can have impact on government. Folks will end up on Medicaid that maybe would have been able to pay for services on their own had they not been exploited. So New York State did a big study on financial exploitation and the impact on the state. It's several years old now, but the factors really haven't changed. And I don't know if you guys have had an opportunity to look at that report, but it certainly was quite informative. And I can get you guys a copy if you need it. Michael, just send me an email. But it's very helpful. So those are kind of our general recommendations. And then I did include, should I email this to you, Michael? You want me to send it? Okay. And then I just included some general resources that were not on the resource page that Matt shared with me, related to some national resources that might be helpful. Of course, the National Center on Elder Abuse, which is administered by the Administration for Community Living, which oversees a lot of issues related to adult protective services. And then NAPSA that I mentioned before, the National Adult Protective Services. And then as you can see here, AARP and other federal financial authorities that have either information to help with prevention or have an investigatory authority related to certain types of cases. I think the one, it's not always known, about the postal inspector, or even the Secret Service can get involved in certain cases. So it is really a wealth of resources that are out there available, and what can we do to collaborate and be more informed about what can support us to prevent and intervene in these types of circumstances. So that's kind of my spiel. So I'll just leave it for questions.
Thank you very much, and I'll begin. And as I think about it, yeah, for sure we would love to have that New York report,
Okay.
and any other resources or written suggestions that you want to submit and turn in, that would be fabulous.
Okay.
And it's interesting too. We were talking in our last meeting with the representative from the Department of Banking,
Mhm.
and Joan were having a conversation at the end about this concept of a trusted contact, and
Mhm.
that could be something that we might be able to include in our recommendations. And so, again, as we've been looking at this work and thinking about kind of these core concepts of prevention, collaboration, communication, education, quality assurance, um, you know, it's it, it all helps us to kind of frame and understand these issues. And obviously, a big piece, as I was mentioning earlier, is this concept of a community ombudsman, and there's a work group, and I feel like and correct me if I'm wrong, but in a previous meeting of that community ombudsman, I think you made some affirmative comments about a liaison. Could you, the importance of such a role or a liaison in the community for people to kind of help navigate the different systems? Could you elaborate a little bit more about that for us and your feelings on that?
Certainly. I mean, I think, regardless of where it sits, so, I'm not going to get into, where this should happen, but the reality is that any opportunity that we have to inform and support the public regarding these types of concerns is important because the easier folks are able to access quality information, whether it's the elder abuse hotline at the AG's office, whether it's the websites at the various state and federal agencies, whatever we can do to share and educate the public about this issue, the better. Our systems can be somewhat complicated, even for us that work in it. So the reality is, if we can become more educated and find ways to, facilitate this, the better. The other area that I think that we need to look at is also kind of as far as making sure that some of this information is available in other languages. We have been working to try to improve our ability to reach all of the public. Connecticut is an aging but also diversifying state. We are changing. So what can we do to do that? We recently deployed a new mechanism for our hotline. We have kind of a voice response system that we didn't have before. That line is now available both in English and Spanish. What can we do? Because I think there are pockets of the population that we're not reaching. So whatever plans we make as far as education is concerned, we know that in protective services, we have language line available to us. We have interpreters that go out in the field with us. But we are in our plans have a desire to elevate our ability to educate folks in whether it's Spanish, which is obviously the biggest language, but Italian, French Creole, Chinese. As our state diversifies, our need to be able to do that is important. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. And I'll have just two more quick questions before I pass it on. And with all the increased awareness that's going to be happening and the increased reports, have you guys been able to hire more social worker staff to respond to that, to handle these new cases?
So, the movement in staffing has been a bit slow, but we have been able, and this past December, we got 7 social workers on board. As many of the state agencies are experiencing, we're in this, silver tsunami of retirement. So you kind of feel like you're treading water a little bit. But, there certainly is a desire to have our staffing on pace with the cases that we received. And that too was a recommendation in the state auditor's report is to, review our caseloads and to ensure that we have, a review of how we can maintain the growth in cases with the casework population. So yeah, absolutely. It's an important factor.
Great, thank you. And then the last thing I'll ask about, and I'm not sure if you guys aggregate your data this way, but I was curious about whether or not you all track elders who are exploited by whether or not they're their Medicaid recipients, because not all of them are.
No, we collect certain information, and we are actually in the works of getting a new data system. Our system was developed like in the late 90s. So it really is it works. But it's not as sophisticated to be able to kind of do that kind of cross-cutting stuff. But we do collect Medicaid numbers for folks who are active. And in many cases, for elders that we serve, we're facilitating access to Medicaid. So it becomes difficult for us to be able to parse that out, just in the way that our database is designed. But I think that that's something we should pursue to really be able to parse that out. And often we may be able to identify whether or not someone's on Medicaid, but they could be Medicaid eligible. So it really it's difficult for us to kind of parse that out. Like, and what level of Medicaid are you on? Are you receiving what we call the Medicare supplement, or are you receiving full Medicaid, like the Home Care for Elders program on long-term care? So we do have Medicaid numbers in our system, but it would be difficult to really speak well to that.
No, I certainly appreciate that, and that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're maybe entering in the beginning phase and gonna kind of help push them towards enrollment. And part of the reason why I ask is just kind of our original charge and task having to do with the Medicaid application process, and the state really trying to be mindful with rebalancing and the Age Well initiatives and things like that. I think going forward, if there's somehow a way to begin to capture that, just to kind of help inform policymakers about kind of like the impact. But I certainly understand that. And so that'll conclude my questions for now. I'm going to open it up to the board. I see Laura has a question, and for other folks too, please raise your hand. Thank you.
Well, Laura, we play together all the time. I'm surprised you have a question with us being on the board together.
Well, I think I know the answer, but it's important that this information come from you. So one of the questions that I have, and it piggybacks on what Michael was just talking about, was do the social workers, when they come across a case where maybe somebody needs assistance and could benefit from, and maybe they don't have a lot of assets or income, and maybe they could benefit from applying for Medicaid. One, this is a compound question, is do the social workers assist with helping that person apply for Medicaid? And two, what do they do, or do they have any training around what to do if they see a more complex case? In other words, there's assets involved, or they come across, the big bank account that nobody ever told anybody about, that sort of thing. I just remember some of these cases from my day and representing your unit, but maybe you can explain that to the rest of the panel.
Right. So in supporting clients to access the program, we will work with them to get, an application for long-term care. Most folks are seeking support through the Connecticut Home Care Program. Some folks are looking for long-term, most folks are looking for LTSS Medicaid support. So as far as supporting the application is concerned, it really varies on the complexity of the elder situation and what their capacity and natural supports are. But so we do help folks get application and move forward. But the complexity of the application process may require that they need other supports to finish it. As you spoke to, I've got that big bank account that I didn't know about. It gets complicated. So sometimes if the elder has cognitive capacity, then we will support them to identify someone that can help them through that process. It is challenging. There are a lot of legal requirements and documents that need to be handed in as part of the Medicaid process. So, sometimes support is needed to facilitate that, depending on the complexity of your financial situation. And we serve folks regardless of their background as far as, information and referral and support. So, we may have an individual that may already be receiving benefits or or has a lower income and less complex financial background, that it's pretty much a slam dunk. And then there are other ones that have, various, financial accounts that make it a more daunting process to complete. So it really does vary. So when we find a difficult case, if a case is already submitted, sometimes there will be quality assurance kind of alarms that will go off. And our QA department may need to get involved. So it really depends. And that's where you may uncover some fraudulent activity that has happened as part of the Medicaid application process. But yeah, it's all I can say is it's complicated, and it really depends on the client how much we're able to support them.
Okay, so one of the things that we've been discussing is perhaps maybe developing a checklist of some sorts for individuals who are non-attorneys that would be assisting, individuals with Medicaid applications. Right now at the State Unit on Aging, obviously I have a lot of involvement with the area agencies on aging, and that's sort of where we first started to talk about that, because some of the RCs and the area agency on aging staff help with that process. And it would be good to maybe have a checklist if they see certain things in a Medicaid application, then that's a trigger for that person who's a non-attorney to say, you know what, I think you need to go to an elder law attorney who is, versed in applying for Medicaid to get some advice. Do you think that would be something that would be helpful to your staff and their process if they're helping with an application?
So I think that no one is stopped from making application for Medicaid. So if someone provides an application and more information is requested, individuals who make application get a report back called a 1348 of things that may be lacking in their application, right? So let's say you submitted an application and you provided 1 year's worth of bank accounts. And the way that the Medicaid process works is that our review goes back 5 years, and you need like the January and the December reports for the preceding first 5 years. And then if they review those accounts and there's any concerns, and they'll send out requests for additional information. They'll identify whether or not there's a life insurance policy with cash value. So I mean, help is never a bad thing. But the department, certainly when you submit your application, provides you feedback on what is needed. So
I guess I was thinking as a almost a step in advance before they submit an application, to be able to get that legal advice that they need before they submit an application. So it would be some sort of, and this is just kind of a thought that we were having, is to have something sort of a checklist to say, if this person has these types of assets, perhaps, maybe they should talk to a elder law attorney before submitting an application. So
yeah, I mean, I can't really speak to that. I mean, normally if folks have a need and they are stating that they do not have the funds to pay for care, we're supporting them to submit that application. So, I've not encountered, it in that kind of way. Because usually when folks do, other estate planning, it's usually because they have more resources that can be used for their care. So for us, it's a complicated thing. So I think I'd have to punt on that one, because I think most of the folks that we're serving to make application for Medicaid are making Medicaid application because they don't have the funds to pay for care.
yeah.
That's who we're seeing.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering if that would be a helpful tool for your staff to have in preparation for maybe helping somebody, to be able to get them the right advice before applying. But
So the Medicaid program does have a sheet about what is required for the Medicaid application. So, I maybe I'm not the person to ask, because most of the folks that we are helping are folks that are reporting that they don't have the funds to pay. So it's a little unique for us.
and what
The other
training?
hand, I'm sorry.
Oh, and what training do the PSE workers have as far as Medicaid applications?
We do have a training and overview as far as our core training related to making application for the Medicaid program. We have a core training going on right now, and our initial training goes over all of the different types of Medicaid programs that there are. But again, the Medicaid application process is something that is available for the general population to do. So it shouldn't require specialized expertise to be able to do that. Because I should be able to make application for myself if I needed it. And we don't have systems in place that would require folks to pay experts to access a government program. So, I mean, folks can pay for whatever they want, but when we, help folks to make application, that's not something that we've encountered.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dorian.
You're welcome. I didn't
Thank
know
you.
whose hand was up first.
I believe Matthew was next and then Joan.
Dorian, so one thing that the task force has discussed at the prior meeting is the potential for like a Bill of Rights for consumers in home care, especially as more long-term care supports are being provided outside of a facility setting, but in the home. And this may be more anecdotal. I don't know if you have any statistics on the cases that come before you that might involve an actual a more formal caregiver. But I'm wondering as to your thoughts as to you spoke to training and education, just your thoughts on both sides to those who might be seeking home care support services, and also the caregivers as to what would cross the line of being appropriate in their relationship with those whom they might be giving care. And I think that one of the things that also was mentioned in the audit was potentially doing the more formalized criminal history records check for those who might be homemaker companion. But I was just wondering as to your just experience with caregivers crossing over into their needs, and and how someone who might be dependent on care may be subject to exploitation.
So, I mean, it certainly is a concern. When you look at the number of individuals that you're talking about, folks that are caretakers in our, agency or related folks, or or some other kind of caretaker, the number, if there's one, there's too many. But in comparison to family members, even spouses, it's low. So when we look at the abuser relationship in our program, we identified that, last year there were 164 individuals that are identified as alleged perpetrators. It's not necessarily, folks that have been, determined to have that status. And unrelated caretakers that could fall into various categories, that was about 325. In comparison to family relative, over 3,000, 3,500, almost 3,600, and spouses over 800. So family members are the main deal here. But I think anything that we can do, because one is too many, 164 is way too many. So anything that we can do to educate the public and to educate folks that are going into this work about appropriate boundaries, that you should not be borrowing money from the person that you're providing services to. And it's hard because these are very intimate relationships, especially when folks are getting personal care. It may be the only contact that they have from the outside. It is hard. And then, when you're looking at that kind of relationship, sometimes the lines get crossed, and we just need to make sure that we are clearly articulating to all parties involved that it's in everyone's best interest to keep those boundaries clear.
And I just had one more question. So clearly when a case gets to you, it's reached, you know, an unfortunate threshold. Um, for the exploitation cases, where are you getting most of your referrals? That because that might be helpful in identifying where a place, you know, from a place of prevention or education could be. Are the exploitation cases mostly coming from your own unit's investigation of some other, whether it's an abuse or neglect, or are you receiving, whether it's through banking, ombudsman? I'm just curious where those exploitation cases are coming from to you.
Okay, so we got last year we got approximately 1,500 referrals from banks and credit unions. And you know, we partnered with the Department on Banking and do a lot of presentations for banks and credit unions related to that. Some of the referrals are coming from the larger national banks that are doing business in other states that banks and credit unions may be mandated reporters. So they just apply a uniform policy and report to us. So we get many referrals from the big box banks, right? And then we get more local referrals from, individual situations where folks have concerning behaviors. But we have done work with the Credit Union Association, Bankers Association on those types of issues. And we do get a number of referrals, a fair number of referrals from banks and credit unions.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Matthew, was that your last question? Okay, so I just want to be mindful that we don't forget we have built in a 5-minute break. I see that Joan and Anna have their hands up. Dorian, if you wouldn't mind, I think what we'll do is we'll take a brief 5-minute break and then come back, and then we'll start with Joan and then go to Anna, if that's all right.
No problem.
Okay, so Cameron, so we're going to take a quick break. I see we're like a minute or two early. That's okay. We'll do a 5-minute break and then we will be back. Thank you. All right, we'll give another moment or so for our members to return on camera. Okay, and welcome back, everyone. I believe Joan was next. Joan?
Thank you. Thanks, Dorian. The presentation was really good. Thank you. I appreciate the slides. So I was thinking as you were going through about the meeting that we did have last time that Michael brought up, and I think somebody else brought up too with the Department of Banking. And one of the things that we're all kind of in agreement with is the training that the tellers and the people at the banks get is very good. And it sounds like that's where you get a lot of your referrals too. So that seems to be working. So where we're finding that it's more difficult to train is in the other aspects in the healthcare, because there are so many different people who come into contact with the consumer. You mentioned needing an increase in tools, and I'm just wondering if you have specifics on what you think could help to better train the other people who might come into contact with the elders, because I find that even some home care workers don't know that they're mandated reporters. There's a lot of lack of training, and I don't know if you have any suggestions for us on where we could help increase that.
So one of the things that I think would be helpful, we do have a very general training related to the protective services program that's available on our website. But we know that it may be more helpful to have additional trainings that are targeted to different professionals. And, we'd love to, work with folks to be able to do that, to give more scenarios that may speak to what they may be seeing in the homes, if that's their profession. So I think that if we could do more targeted training, I know that folks, take our general training. We're glad to come out and do presentations. I'm actually doing a lunch and learn next week with from staff from one of the hospital systems. So we are always available to present. But the more that we can do to train leaders within those industries to do a general overview on how to make a referral and to get people's comfort levels up with that. So even at our department, if folks, on the child welfare side have some concern, right? Our colleagues in other units may come to us for support in making that referral. So that if we could have folks that are informed about our process, and when folks may feel uncomfortable about making that call independently, they can say, hey, you can come to me, go to Joan if you need to make a referral, and she can help you through that process. And once folks kind of do it, they get more comfortable and they're more willing to make that call on their own. But anything that we can do to have liaisons, if you will, to ensure that referrals happen would be really helpful. So, if within organizations folks want us to come out, we'll do that, and we can do more train the trainer models to ensure that folks are informed. At least we can target specific industries that are likely to encounter this.
Right. And I mean, my take on why the banking training is working so well is there's money involved, and the banks want to make sure that they're watching that money. And so they mandate it for their own employees. So are you thinking that the training that is offered should be something that's mandated to certain industries or just available?
Well, I mean, I think that we find that folks seek us out. We do have mandated training for certain financial agents already.
Right.
So there are other professions that are required to take certain levels of training. So the more that we make it available, the better. So whether it's mandated, but we need to make sure that it is relevant and available. So I think we need to build up, targeted trainings to certain professions to make sure that it really kind of reaches home so that they understand what their role and responsibilities are and the consequences of not reporting. And anything that we can do to enhance the opportunity for training, I think we should do. And I don't think that we have a lot.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to follow up too with the what you were talking about with Laura on the checklist. I'm a private practice attorney, so we do Medicaid applications. So one of the examples that I thought of when you were talking with her is, if somebody has a disabled child, for example, and they might not. Oftentimes people are not spent all the way down. So, sometimes that's missed if they just apply and they don't realize that there may be a way for them to safeguard some of that money for the child. So that's the checklist that we're kind of thinking of, is there are some facts that pop up in people's history that may not make it seem like it's complex, and they might not know to share it. And then they get to a situation where they've lost something that they could have retained. So those are like disabled child exemption, or if there's a child that's been caring for the parent in the home, there might be able to be an exemption for them to receive the home. So those are the types of things that I think we were thinking would be on the checklist, so that somebody who's helping fill out an application might be able to say, is there a child who's been living with you, or is there a disabled child? And in that case, you should probably seek out some assistance with this, because there are exemptions that you might be entitled to.
Okay, I think I misunderstood the question. I thought you were talking about just making application and how to fill out the application.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I kind of got that sense from your answer. Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in eligibility, but certainly would be willing to learn more about that process. We certainly could talk it out, but I'm not a representative of the Medicaid program, so I can't speak to how folks work on the resources, et cetera. But I'd love to be educated about what that's all about. That would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's what our main focus of the task force has been, is making sure that the big picture, everybody's as educated as possible, and making the information as simple and straightforward as possible. So when people do seek out assistance from one of us, if it's not necessarily our expertise, we know to refer to somebody else, just so the people get the right information. So,
well, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
Very good. And so we have Anna next, and then I saw Steve's hand. If you want to raise it after Anna's done, that's fine. And then after that, I believe we should move on to our next guest, Inspector Tracy Enns. But for now, we'll go Anna.
All right, thanks. And thank you, Dorian, for your presentation and these great responses. So my question is about what does the response look like when you hear from someone who, or when you encounter somebody who maybe has been exploited in a more systemic way? So I'm thinking maybe somebody who has been the victim of a predatory lender or a bad third-party electric supplier, where it's probably not just them, like there might be several hundred people who have been exploited in the same way. What does the coordination look like, with like Office of Consumer Counsel or DCP? And, is there a mechanism to inform other folks who might have been similarly exploited?
So a lot of times when we have issues related to, vendor type things, we often work with consumer protection. But again, I think that one of the recommendations that we said earlier is there a way for us to have more collaborative opportunities, related to these specific issues? So certainly on with the Elder Justice, we do a lot of discussion about, these types of coordination issues. But sometimes when you get into the specialty of this, there may be a need for us to have almost like a separate, either whether it's a subcommittee or another work group, to really speak to those issues because they're unique. And we want to make sure that we're catching them. So I do know that we do come across like scams and frauds, and we do come across individuals that may be engaging in business practices that are less than supportive. And so if we can find, additional vehicles to support collaboration, we would welcome that, because it's complicated. Again, most of the things that we encounter are individual situations, but anything that we can, do to be better informed and to collaborate and educate, we're willing to do, because someone that we served in one other program or with one other circumstance could fall prey to these type. So if we can get better educated about that and share that information, we welcome the opportunity to do so.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Dorian, so much for joining us. You're welcome to remain for the rest of the meeting if you like, though I know you have a very busy schedule. And so our next guest is Inspector Tracy Enns from the Chief State's Attorney's Office. And Tracy brings a wealth of experience investigating fraud and intimately understands the issues that arise in the criminal justice process. I would like to express a special thank you to Marie Allen and Deputy Chief Kevin Lawler for facilitating Tracy joining us today. And so hello, Tracy, and welcome to our circle.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. I just want you to know, unfortunately, I don't have a fancy slideshow to show you, so you only get me. I apologize for that. But I do have a lot of thoughts. When I was first asked to do this, I put a lot of time and effort. I read everything that I was sent, and I really tried to come up with some thoughts that I thought would be useful and helpful to you. So I just want to kind of convey all those to you now. Also, so you know, I've been a police officer for over 30 years. I've worked for the Chief State's Attorney's Office for 8 years, 7 of which I worked in the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. So I do have information on Medicaid, and I've done a lot of Medicaid fraud crimes. So I do have input as far as that goes. I did speak to the supervisor now of the Medicaid fraud unit when I realized I'd be speaking with you today. And I asked her if there was anything that she would like to convey to you. And she told me to tell you the Medicaid fraud control unit is looking to expand fraud, abuse, and neglect to outside the nursing home and hospital atmosphere. So right now, if there is a complaint of, an untimely death, some sort of abuse in a nursing home, that type of thing, the Department of Public Health would investigate that, and they would let us know as well. And we would also go and investigate, because if they're a Medicaid recipient that was in that situation. So they have discussed how to develop a protocol with DPH at this time, and that's going to be forthcoming. So they're trying to expand that. Regarding my investigations as a Medicaid employee, I looked at all sorts of things. I would have been called to situations where I would have to investigate, for example, like I said, a suspicious death where people felt, family members felt that the employees there did not handle the situation properly, that there might be some sort of issue there, or their loved one was not getting the proper care in that facility that they should be getting. So we would look at those type situations. We looked at provider fraud. There's an awful lot of provider fraud. And the important thing, I think it's amazing that for most things, you have to be a licensed provider to be a provider in the Medicaid system. And it's when you have people that aren't licensed and are not going through the proper process that you have issues. I will just throw out, I had a case where somebody pretended to be a licensed provider, and they were able to commit a ton of Medicaid fraud. So they were pretending to be someone who was licensed, and they were not. And the licensed person had no idea this person was pretending to be them and submitting bills. they were a provider, so they knew how to do it, but they weren't a Medicaid provider. So these type of things happen. Another thing I'll throw out to you, for example, is a situation where you have someone who's a provider and also a recipient. So to be a recipient, you can only make a certain amount of money. But as a provider, they were making a lot of money as a provider. There was no, in the system that DSS had, there was no way, there was no edit to check if they were a recipient and a provider. So they would never have been a recipient if the system had known they were a provider. So those are the type things. So there are edits in the DSS system that I know and I have discussed with investigators in the past that they wish that they have. And, you know, when we discuss it, it comes down to, you know, money, it's a complicated system, that type of thing. So it's something to be aware of that should probably be addressed going forward. And it may have, you know, I have not been doing Medicaid fraud for a little over a year, so keep that in mind. But these are the type of things. So I think my thought was, when you set things up for the Medicaid system, if you set it up so you keep theft in mind and how fraud may transpire, that ultimately protects the elder or the person who's a Medicaid recipient. The other thing I'll throw out to you is during my time as a Medicaid inspector, DSS stopped throwing out the benefit sheets. So what they would do is suddenly they would get information, and you know, I would show up on their door and I would say, oh, you have all these billings in your name. And they would say, and sometimes there were 200, 300 billings in their name for, say, therapy, psychological therapy. And they would say, I never went to that provider. Well, they never had an EOB to show them that these were being billed. So then when I asked, well, why isn't there an EOB? Because it costs money to send EOBs out. And a lot of things are going online. Well, when you're working with older people, a lot of them don't go online. They don't work that way, and you need to keep things simple. I had more people tell me they would let me know. They would have called us if they had known all this fraud was going on. The other thing is, if you're a Medicaid recipient, this is a big deal to you. You really appreciate getting Medicaid, and people don't like fraud happening with the Medicaid system. I've also had suspects, more than one, tell me it's too easy. The system's set up too easy. It was too easy for them to commit the fraud. I think going forward, and I don't have all the information and I haven't been out in all the meetings that you've been in, but I think you need to think about those type of things to set it up so it's not so easy. I'll throw you out an example. So as an investigator and a police officer, I need to collect evidence and I need to show evidence of a crime. So I was always looking for ways to prove it. So I would look at a person's application, for example, and then I would look at, you know, if they were a provider, for example, and match those two things together and see how they conflict. I would go out and do interviews with all sorts of victims and learn, oh, you know, we never had that service, that type of thing. Or maybe a service was happening that they shouldn't have been getting. For example, a dentist who is providing services that they really shouldn't be providing, but they're billing for it and they're doing it for anyway, even though the person didn't really need it. So there's been circumstances where employees at dental offices have said, you know, we really, that person shouldn't have done it, but the dentist did it anyway, that type of thing. So Unfortunately, I live in a world where people do things that you don't think about and expect. And you do need to think about things when you're setting up this program, that those type of things happen. And it would save a lot of money with simple things when you give those type of thoughts to these things. In addition to that, I also spoke to several of the other police inspectors that I worked with regarding elder abuse, just generally speaking, and reporting. Elders, oftentimes, you just need to keep it simple, and they don't know where to go to. And I have gone and worked on many cases where providers, family members, elders, they don't know who to speak to on certain things. I'm going to throw out a food for thought for you. I think you need to keep it simple. If you go online, you can see there's going to be pages of information. It's quite overwhelming. It's quite overwhelming for somebody, who's not an elderly person sometimes. So we need to keep that in mind. And I was thinking about, ways to solve this. Maybe a brochure. You have brochures all over the state. Where do elders go? They go to senior care clinics. They go to the doctor. Every doctor's office should have a brochure to tell them how to report these type of crimes. The other thing that I thought of when I was speaking to the other inspectors and their concerns in reference to this was, you need people to have one place to go to. And if not one place, a couple of places, but they should all report to each other. And I'm going to throw you out an example. Department of Children and Families, DCF. The police report to DCF. We all know what the number is. People all know if you want to report child abuse, you call DCF. It's very simple. Everybody knows that. They all know it off the top of their head. You can ask any police officer on the street. They're going to know that information. If you ask your average police officer who to contact beyond the police department, they might be able to come up with one or two places. But when you're a social worker and you're working in these agencies, these state agencies, you work with it all the time. You're very familiar with it. That type of education isn't out there. The other thing is regarding police officers. They also have all different levels of training. So some don't have extended training in financial crimes or elder abuse and that type of thing. So, and then you have police departments of all different sizes, numbers, communities of all different sizes, numbers, financial availability is different for all of those things. So all those type factors need to be considered. Just because something might be working in Hartford, it might not work that way in a smaller community. And I think those type of things also need to be considered as well. Regarding filling out the application and having support from attorneys, I absolutely think that that is something that is necessary at certain times. I will tell you, as a law enforcement officer, I often get people that try to circumvent that because they don't want to spend the money. So that you need to keep that in mind as well. Division of Criminal Justice, we take complaints all the time here. Every day we have a complaint officer who takes complaints from calls from the community. And in all my years working here, I have found most people, and we don't give legal advice here, but they're trying to get legal advice that's not going to cost them anything. That's why people are often calling us. So I think the system needs to work for everybody. It needs to work for somebody that can afford to go to an attorney. It needs to work for somebody who can't afford to go to an attorney. My other thoughts is you need somebody to check on people that are getting the Medicaid funds. I have found some of the victims, they don't have the family and the support system. Sometimes they pretend that they have the family and support system. I have looked at reports from social workers, and you know, the reports may be 30 pages long, but I know a lot of information based on the investigation that I'm doing. And sometimes what the recipient is telling the social worker is not at all accurate. So sometimes they have, one, they don't see themselves as a victim. Two, they're using the system to defraud the system or to make it work in the way that they want it to work. Some recipients are given money where they're able to manage, right, their situation and to pay providers and that type of thing. And they manipulate sometimes how to do that. Well, when that manipulation, when they start manipulating things, they also get their providers involved. And sometimes, you know, if they change, say, for example, the hours that a provider is working. So when a provider is supposed to work from 4 in the afternoon to 8 at night every day, but it's not working out with the way they were financially, the recipients financially setting things up, they'll say to the provider, you're still going to get paid, which the provider wants to get paid, right? They want to get paid for those 4 hours, but I need to move you from 10 in the morning till 2 o'clock instead for the paperwork that gets submitted in reference to, so they can get reimbursed for this. So there's a lot of different types of fraud that happens in this type of system. And I think it's something that we should be aware of. Providers also, they just, sometimes they submit things that they're not at all doing, or they will take an elderly person, for example, and they'll make promises to them. The elderly people, a lot of times they don't have people to speak with. They want the attention. They start to take these people as their friends. And unfortunately, they get led down a path of fraud that they don't even see this happening. You really need to have people that go in and check. And I realize the volume of people that we're dealing with is a lot in manpower issues, money issues, time issues, all of that. But things fall through the cracks. And if we're talking about an individual who's in home care, they may be in a bed that they can't get out of, that type of thing. Say they have a social worker that comes to visit them once a month. You may need somebody else that's going in and checking. The other thing that I found, and social workers are not police officers. Sometimes we come at it from a different perspective. And I think training is extremely important. And I know people I've spoken to, or if I caught something or I saw something going on, you know, even the social workers shocked when I've been able to have the opportunity to tell them what's going on because they couldn't believe it. But it would be helpful if, yes, we want to provide the services to these people. Yes, we want to make sure they have all the care that they need, but we have to look beyond that as well. And sometimes I think that might be a piece that we miss. So training in that area would be very helpful. Regarding forensic accountants, it's very important to have forensic accountants. I use forensic accountants in the position that I was in the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. But you need all the pieces of the puzzle. I will tell you, When I worked with the Department of Public Health, say for example, if I had somebody in a nursing home where I had a situation that family member was making a complaint, they would go in, they had no relationship with the nursing home other than being there to do the job that they needed to do. That's what you need. They went in, they did their job, they did the report, they worked with me, and we would get the job done. And I think all of those things are very important to really have a system that's working well. And they were amazing. So for example, I know the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit here is hoping to maybe be able to employ a nurse at some point to help them with their cases. My point to you is it's important to have all the pieces to the puzzle. Yes, the forensic accountant's important, but you need to have enough investigators. You need to have, a nurse to be able to speak to. And we need cooperation with all the agencies. When I first got hired as inspector in the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, I went to the Department of Public Health, introduced myself, so they got to know who I am. I went to the Department of Social Services, did that there as well, and made sure that I had a good working relationship with everyone. I also would work with the Attorney General's office, the investigators there, Health and Human Services Office of the Inspector General. We all had separate jobs to do, but we would come together as a team to make the job more efficient and to be able to get the job done. Another thing I'm going to throw out to you, because I know that Dorian had mentioned that they have subpoena power to get paperwork in reference to elder abuse complaints. Well, police departments don't have that. So we would have to get a search warrant, which you would need probable cause for a search warrant. And sometimes that just takes a lot of time and extra work. And what if we don't have enough for probable cause? And those are the type of situations where it makes me nervous. So we have to have probable cause, or we're not going to get a search warrant to get the information. And maybe having a carve out for elders for that might be something for you to discuss as well. There's a lot of people in this state with a lot of wealth, with the elderly and communities. You have people that are out in the community, and you need, all communities are different. So social services might be different in their communities, that type of thing. I think each community needs to be assessed on its own, on an individual basis, not, making blanket statements about, oh, we're gonna do this thing on this punch list. We need to make sure that it works in each one of these communities, that you have the people doing the work in each place. And if it's not, you need to come up with a way to do that. And I also read over your vision, mission, governing principles, and I thought everything was wonderful. And I know everybody has, their heart and soul into coming up with all of this. But the major thing that I would just want to convey to you all is, if you look at it from a fraud perspective, set it up so you can alleviate some of the fraud. You shouldn't be having suspects telling police officers that this is set up so it's way too easy. The other thing is, I found access, especially now with COVID. I haven't been working on these cases now under this circumstance. I'm sure it's even harder. People need to be educated. They need to get the information out there. The information needs to go, it can't be just online. It needs to go in a simple way where it really gets out there in the community. And I really think you should look at, maybe it's great having all these places where people can report, but maybe having one place that really pays attention to reporting, and having people work together that way, but you want a place that's committed to the cause and has the education to know everything about this particular issue. And those are my thoughts on things that you should consider.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tracy. And I'll begin with a few questions. And for our members, please raise your hand. See, Laura will go after me. So thank you so much. That was a very kind of broad look, and you touched on a lot of important topics. Briefly, I just want to mention for our audience members, EOB is explanation of benefits, where the record of what was medically done gets sent to the payer, and that kind of helps people understand like what they're getting charged for. And it's interesting to me to kind of think about this too, as we talk about the longevity economy and we talk about people living longer, and we think about, oh, actually it's a lot of family members exploiting their elder parents. Like this is one of the consequences of people living longer. They're like, oh, I was supposed to get my inheritance a long time ago, and they keep sticking around. What's going on with that? It's just something that's very, very interesting to consider as we talk about these things. And you brought up a really interesting point too, and I'm thank you, Dorian, too, for sticking around. I was reading in the PSE annual report that they use reasonable cause versus probable cause as a standard. And it's interesting to kind of think about, like, when we talk about the vulnerability of this population. So again, just on a separate tangential angle here, when we talk about the impact of COVID, at the beginning of our meetings, I mentioned the number, and it's still now out of 9,442 COVID deaths, according to the most recent state report, 8,542 are, again, almost 91% of them are age 60 and up. So this is a very impacted population without a doubt. And so I just wanted to thank you for your candid expression of your thoughts, and if we I understand that you are you're coming to us, but the recommendations of having enough investigators, cooperation with agencies, financial accountants, are there any other things that you think as regard to the state's attorneys? Because this is a very important agency, and I know in the past they've had you guys are working very diligently, have huge caseloads, things like that. Is there any other things that you think might help for us to put in as a recommendation for the legislature to consider, that might be even more supportive for your agency? Because again, it's a very important one, and you guys do very great work to help enforce our laws and protect our victims.
Well, I can. Right now, I'm in the unemployment fraud control unit, and so at this present time, there's 2 of us that are investigating unemployment fraud, and we're working on trying to get a 3rd person. The volume of work is tremendous. I work out of the statewide prosecution bureau, and this, in addition to the prosecutors and a supervisory inspector, we have, let me count for a minute, 3 other inspectors in that unit, excluding other units that are also within the unit, but they have a different function. So I think, and we used to have an elder abuse unit here, which we don't anymore. There's just so much we're going to be able to handle. I think that's the point. I think inspectors are often used by police department as someone they can go to that they trust, that we have additional training, education, years of experience, and they can. And we also obviously have the attorneys here. They can come to us with any answers, questions for anything that they may not know, they may need support on. And so that's very important. And we do have police departments that call to ask us questions, that type of thing. Statewide prosecution does do some elder abuse investigations. But again, we are limited by the personnel that we have, and everybody's very busy and the crime just keeps happening. So I think if you really want to tackle this issue, you need to have enough people in all the areas. I said to you before, you have to have all the pieces of the puzzle. You leave some pieces out, it's not going to work well. And there's going to be problems. You need to figure out what all the pieces are, make sure you have all the pieces, and part of that is the personnel that you need. The other thing, again, I threw it out to you before, you have police departments, you have police departments in the state that have 10 officers, and you have police departments in the state with several hundred or 1,000 officers. So what each one of those departments are able to do for training, that type of thing. A lot of the departments have detectives, not all the departments have detectives. I was a police detective for 16 years. And so I'm very familiar with what, I retired from the Farmington Police Department before I came here. I'm very familiar with what detectives would do, and I would have gotten those type of cases in Farmington. But what Farmington does in a smaller town that's not Farmington does is totally different thing. So you need to make sure that in all areas of the state, it's covered. People have the training that they need. And even in my investigations as a Medicaid investigator, I would find, because I would talk to so many people, social workers, people in all these different agencies, complainants, clients, and people would say all different types of things, and a lot of times people didn't know where to go to get the services, or they would make a phone call and nobody's calling them back. They left a message, that type of thing. You have to have people on the other end of the phone. They have to be able to know who to call, and it has to be a simple process. And you got to make sure that even though you have this punch list, you have to make sure that punch list works.
Very good. Thank you so much. And, I really do applaud the work of the Chief State's Attorney's Office. You guys in the last few years have been doing a lot of great work reforming the pre-screening initiative, the rollout of a new database. I love to hear that this new innovative concept of bringing a nurse on board to help with the work. These are all in the right direction to kind of help with this collaboration, cooperation, education piece that we've been talking about. So thank you for sharing that. I see Laura and then Marie. So we'll go to Laura now. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Tracy. Before working at the State Unit on Aging, I worked with Protective Services for the elderly with Dorian. And under state statute, Protective Services has an obligation to report situations to the Chief State's Attorney's Office where they believe a crime may have been committed. And so one of the questions that I had for you, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this because I understand you're in the Medicaid fraud unit versus the financial crimes unit. It's my understanding, and you can confirm this or tell me if things have changed, but after the elder abuse unit that used to exist was disbanded because it was formed under a grant, all of that was rolled into the financial crimes unit. And when I was working for Protective Services, I was working with Jack Whalen and Jack Bannon and Chuck Coffey on those cases.
Right.
Maybe you can describe for everyone, and again, this is just driving home that point of the need for more resources within the Chief State's Attorney's Office. But what's the volume or what's the process or maybe the probability that an individual's case, not necessarily a Medicaid fraud case, but say you have a an older individual who's been defrauded through a scam or through a family member or, something like that, and it goes to the financial crimes unit because that's really the only other place that it can go.
Right.
Now, what are their resources like?
You mean the unit itself?
Yeah, what are their resources like to be able to handle a case like that?
Well, I can tell you, so I was in Medicaid, I'm in unemployment fraud now. So unemployment fraud falls under the statewide prosecution. Jack Bannon is my supervisory inspector. Jack Whalen is the supervisor as well. And I know Chuck Coffey very well also. We have all the resources at our fingertips because you have long-term people who get hired here have had a lot of experience in law enforcement. So it might be with a local department, it might be coming from a federal agency, but we know a lot of people. We have a lot of years of experience and we also have a lot of training. So to even be hired in one of these positions, you're usually someone who has a lot of training experience. So we have a lot of resources that way. As far as resources coming from the agency, is that what you're looking at more?
Well, I mean, how many people make up the financial crimes unit and how many of them are planning to retire come, April, and we're all bracing ourselves for?
So again, we have 2 in the unemployment part of it, and we have 3 investigators in statewide that are doing those type of cases. So
Okay.
our numbers are down from where they used to be. And again, I've worked here 8 years and there are a lot, and Jack Bannon, he's going to retire in a couple of months. So there are a lot of people retiring. And unfortunately, the other problem with that is when you have all these senior people that are retiring, you're losing all that knowledge. So it's not just my agency that's going to be impacted, it's all these other state agencies. And I would like to have, and I'm just being honest with you, it would have been nice if
that's what we want.
We could have taken that knowledge before everybody leaves, have people getting trained and being able to talk to those people before they go and get them set up. So I don't know if that's happening, but that sounds like it would be a good plan as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So in addition to replacing the people who are retiring, there's also a need for additional staff just to get up to a number of investigators who can handle the cases.
Oh yeah, we're not able to handle the load that we're being given.
Yeah. So another area that
for every unit either. So
yeah.
So we have a lot of units, but.
So another area that I wanted to touch on that I've done some work on personally is trying to make that connection between law enforcement and other organizations that work with older adults. And this is more to maybe give you some reassurance in that the AARP has been working with the Coalition for Elder Justice on a training program for police officers.
Right.
And so that's going to get started. Actually, I got an email this morning from AARP, Erica Michalowski, and they're going to start doing that with the state police in March.
Okay.
And then I'm going to be working with Joanne Peterson at the police academy to start training new recruits.
Perfect.
On elder abuse. So just so you know that it's kind of like, in the works, but yeah, I think education is key.
It is key.
I don't think police officers and a lot of other mandated reporters even know that they're mandated reporters or where to report. So I think really education and getting those relationships built is important. I think that was all that I wanted to ask you about, but yeah, I mean, kind of more of a reinforcement of what you've already said, that, more staff and education is needed.
Definitely. I 100% support that. And I think you need to look at, who you need to educate and how many people are you going to need to get this job done. And, you mentioned the state police, your local law enforcement officers, they're the ones feeling, helping the elderly in the community and working with their local social services. I think everybody needs to be on the same page, and you don't want to be disjointed where, everyone has their piece of the puzzle, but sometimes we get tunnel vision, and it's really important to be all on the same page. For example, I threw out the example to you when I first got hired. I reached out to Department of Public Health. I reached out to DSS and these other agencies, but it takes a while to develop relationships, for them to get to know me, to trust me, all those type of things. But those things are key, because that's how you get the job done really quickly. And, it's important to have partnerships with your local police departments, so you have somebody to call. Even as a police officer, sometimes it's hard. We can call, but if we don't know the exact person to call, sometimes it's just hard to get where you're trying to go. And it's important to have contacts. Who's going to be our contact at this police department, who we can call and make sure that we can get someone, that type of thing. Those type of things need to be worked out.
Yeah, I agree. And that's been my experience in trying to do that work. Those are all the questions that I have for you, Tracy. Thank you so much for.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. I've been thinking about this issue a lot over the last few years too, and we hear reports recently about low morale in police and law enforcement, and I really think that's something we need to proactively reverse with a lot of recruitment in colleges and universities, because there's so much good work that doesn't get reported. It's not flashy, it's not fancy, it doesn't get on the front page, but every single day law enforcement helps people, and we should really kind of tap into our students. And again, when we talk about workforce development, we've talked before about reaching out to like middle schoolers to become homemaker companions and other types of workers to kind of help bolster the workforce for the growing needs. And I similarly think that we need to do that kind of across the board for our different enforcement agencies, in particular the Chief State's Attorney's Office and our police departments. I see Joan has a hand up, but I know we're running low on time. Marie, you had your hand up too. Do you want to ask your question real quick, and then we'll go to Joan, and then we can, I think, wrap up. We're almost done.
Thank you, Michael. I just wanted to follow up on something Tracy said. I met Tracy when I was maybe 6 or 7 years into my position at the Agency on Aging, and had no idea what the Chief State's Attorney's Office role was with the Medicaid population that we were serving, over 3,500 clients under the Connecticut Home Care Program and other Connecticut Home Care Program waivers, so both elders and persons with disabilities. Even for someone in my position, I didn't recognize that we have protective services, we have the Chief State's Attorney's Office, then I met someone from Consumer Protection who was involved in some of the home care fraud that was suspected, and they were doing investigations. It is a landscape that is extraordinarily confusing, and I think sometimes we're victims of our own success. When you look at protective services for the elderly, all the incredible work that Dorian's done to bring that department together, to raise awareness around those issues. All of the meetings that Dorian goes to, I'm at, and other people from around the state are at. But I have to tell you, representing seniors in Southwestern Connecticut, the seniors have no idea who protective services are. They don't understand the lexicon. They don't know what that means. They have no idea where to call. We think that we've done a great job of communicating these issues, but it couldn't be further from the truth. And Tracy's message is keep it simple for elders. When a family is in distress, when there's a possibility of fraud or exploitation, or even worse, neglect, whether it's self-neglect or neglect perpetrated by a family member or a paid formal caregiver, they don't think, oh, let me go online to 211 and figure out who I should be reporting this to. So I would suggest, if there's anything our task force can do to really look at recommendations that start at the local level, our senior centers, our municipal agents, that boil up to a regional area agency on aging, where we are then taking that message to that single repository, as Tracy said, that one place where, look, based on that situation, should it go to protective services? Should it go to the chief state's attorney's office? Should it go to local law enforcement? Should it go to consumer protection? That's we as the professionals have to triage and get it to the right place, not expect or anticipate the community to be able to understand all of our initial charges and what our call volume or caseload volume is like, and make a decision about who we should communicate with. It is so confusing that even the new supervisor at the chief state's attorney's office was telling me how they're going to expand to the community from just nursing facility investigations out to the community. And she said that she's communicated with the Department of Public Health and they're going to begin working together. Well, that's wonderful, except the majority of long-term services and supports through the Connecticut Home Care Program, those Medicaid waivers where these individuals are getting their help, are under the auspices of the Department of Social Services. So although the Department of Public Health has a wonderful role in controlling and regulating the medical services, the nursing that goes in, 9 times out of 10, these care plans are built on the backs of what we call non-custodial care or non-skilled care, the homemaker companion agencies, the personal care attendants, and those are all under the auspices of the Department of Social Services. So where you find so much of the fraud is in agencies who are not licensed. They are not licensed. They are enrolled in the medical assistance program and are Medicaid providers, but so much confusion exists between a nursing organization that is licensed and a home care. I could put a sign out on my front door right now and say I'm a home care agency, and then enroll with the medical assistance providers and provide home care aids to clients. So there is so much confusion even at our level for the professionals who are working within it. We need to have, instead of a top-down approach where the state, even with all of its valuable work, is not able to communicate the nuances to the community. Let's start at educating the community level, give them one place to call, let some regional organization bring it to the state, and let the state triage and get the help where it's needed, because no one of our organizations can do this alone. It's got to be a community response. Sorry, that's it, Michael.
No problem, Marie. Thank you very much. And since Dorian was mentioned, I'll let you respond before we go to Joan to wrap up. We have just a few minutes left.
Yeah, no, I'll just make it. Thank you, Marie, for your comments. And you know, we're glad to come out and present whenever you want. But I do agree that the more local that we can make the connections and education, the better. So whether it's you know, doing presentations for we have plans to do a presentation for folks that do residential coordinating support for folks in elder housing. We also have done training for we newly have mandated reporters for paratransit. So we've done trainings with those folks and want to do more of it. But I think the important is that that local level is absolutely right. So whether that's forming, you know, local M teams, multidisciplinary teams, fast teams specific to that, to financial issues, the more local we can get, the better. So we welcome the opportunity to come into the communities and do that. Our municipal social service agencies, we work hand in hand with them. And the more that we can do to support that effort, senior center is fantastic, but there is absolutely a need. And I just wanted to reiterate the importance of those community connections to make it happen. Law enforcement as well, they are critical in supporting this work. And the more that we can make it local, the better. But that's where the people are.
Very good. Joan.
I just had a comment. I just appreciated what Tracy was saying about, getting the big picture and how when you started your job, you really met with everybody that would be involved, because I think that's key for us, and, getting the information out there, but also knowing that there's a great group of people that can help the elders, and not one person can do it all. So getting that training out, like Marie and Dorian said, at the local level is going to be key to make sure that the people get the right information. So I appreciate everything you said. I learned a few things and took a lot of notes. So thank you for being here.
Very good. So are there any other questions before I go into closing remarks? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much to both of our speakers, Dorian and Tracy. I feel like this was just a really informative, educational kind of conversation, and part of what we've been trying to cultivate here is being able to kind of have these kind of candid discussions so that we can unearth really great concepts. And as we think about our approach and looking at all of our different agencies in the asset-based lens, meaning that we have a lot of great services too, but it's just like we were talking about. We can do a better job with outreach and awareness. And I think, Tracy, your point about keeping it simple is really important, and that kind of touches on other things that we've discussed in the past about visual-based learning, multiple language accessibility, keeping it simple, things like that. These are going to be very important. And when it comes to this phase of active recruitment, I think we should look at it, because it's not just the Division of Criminal Justice, it's so many agencies across the state, right? Well, what's April going to look like? What's May going to look like coming up? And one of the concepts that I've had for a while now, going back to my postgraduate work, is this concept of the fellowship. And kind of what happens is that we have a lot of agencies out there that are unionized, and so there's certain rules and things that go along with the hiring. But I think there's a unique way. I think they call it a Connecticut career trainee. I would call it a fellow, where maybe if we offer for recent postgrads like 2-year spots, 3-year spots, where they can go and kind of like hop around within an agency and really get a lot of great training and knowledge and help bolster capacity. That might be something we can do, where we keep it fixed, but it doesn't overly interrupt kind of the collective bargain agreements that already exist. And another interesting thing is, I personally speaking, I wear a lot of different hats in the state when it comes to working on this work. And one of the things that I do is help administer the statewide senior center work group, which we have a meeting tomorrow, and I have Dorian will be joining us. And I think it was absolutely on point, the discussion about better interactions, better activating our senior centers, our municipal agents. We have, again, these wonderful resources, these folks that are placed throughout the community, who can help kind of keep a watchful eye out, who can train their other members, who can offer new opportunities, whether it's health, yoga, Zumba, whatever, bring in different experts who might catalyze interest from other members in the community to come into the senior center who maybe they otherwise wouldn't. We have new approaches in multi-generational thinking. We have the example, I believe, of Rocky Hill, which just opened up a senior center, which is kind of emphasize a multi-generational approach, and even have a space for being inclusive of veterans, right? And we know that I said in the last meeting, over 17% of our 65s and up are veterans. So I think there's ways, and the state is currently doing that, and we can kind of continue this conversation through that lens as well. And and continue to think about how we can really kind of catalyze and activate our different agencies and the folks who participate in those, whether they're staff, whether they're fellows, whether they're volunteers, to help better serve and protect our seniors in the state of Connecticut. And so thank you to everyone for being here again. We will continue this conversation on February 3rd. We'll be maybe having some emails back and forth before that point to kind of look at the draft that we hope to have. And I absolutely encourage every one of our members and our speakers, if there's other items, articles, resources, concepts, written materials you'd like to share, please send them in. And thank you again to Joe Perkis for helping to shepherd us through this process. And thank you again to Cameron. Well done on your first meeting with us. And everyone, please